They'll say you're distracted, that you live in your head too much, that you waste time imagining things that aren't real. But here's what nobody tells you, what they call daydreaming. Your brain is actually doing something far more deliberate. It's rehearsing a life it's trying to understand. And psychologists don't dismiss this. They have a name for it. Picture this. You're sitting somewhere quiet, maybe your room, maybe in a car, staring out the window. Nothing is happening around you, but inside, everything is. You've already imagined the conversation you're going to have later. Not once, multiple times. Different versions, different endings. You replay arguments that haven't happened yet. You picture success before it exists. You even imagine emotional moments so vividly. Your body reacts like they're real. You've smiled at something that never actually happened. You felt your chest tighten over a scenario that only existed in your head. And sometimes it goes further. You imagine people saying things they've never said. You create entire situations just to feel something specific. Closure, validation, control. And here's the part you probably don't say out loud. Some of those imagined moments feel more real than your actual life. That's the part most people misunderstand. But here's where it gets interesting. This didn't just start randomly. This pattern is usually shaped early. A brain that builds detailed internal scenarios is often a brain that learned one thing very clearly. Reality is unpredictable, and when reality feels unpredictable, the mind compensates. It starts simulating. If you grew up in an environment where things felt uncertain, emotionally, socially, even subtly, your brain adapts by trying to get ahead of that uncertainty. It runs possibilities before they happen. It prepares you for outcomes before they exist. Not because you're disconnected from reality, because you're trying to stay one step ahead of it. And this is where the psychology gets deeper. Your brain isn't just imagining, it's practicing control in a place where control actually exists. Inside, because outside is never guaranteed. And here's what most people miss about this. When someone constantly imagines scenarios, especially social ones, it's often tied to something called anticipatory processing. Psychologists use this term to describe how the brain tries to predict and prepare for future interactions before they happen. It's common in people who are highly sensitive to outcomes, which means your mind isn't wandering randomly. It's calculating, but there's something underneath that. This doesn't just explain the what. It explains the why it feels so intense, because your brain doesn't fully separate imagination from reality. There's actual research showing that when you vividly imagine something, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways, as if you were experiencing it. Which means, when you imagine being rejected, your body reacts like it's already happened. When you imagine being understood, you feel relief that hasn't technically occurred. And that's why it feels so real. Not because you're dramatic, because your brain is wired to simulate deeply. And psychologists actually connect this to something called mental simulation theory. It's the brain's ability to test experiences before they happen. In simple terms, your mind is running trials, not guesses, simulations. Most people assume this is about escaping reality. It's actually about trying to control it. And this is where the label starts to fall apart, because the world will call this overthinking, but overthinking implies inefficiency. This isn't inefficient. It's adaptive. Your brain is trying to reduce uncertainty, minimize emotional risk, and prepare you for multiple outcomes at once. That's not weakness. That's strategy. But there's a part of this pattern that people don't usually expect. And once you see it, it changes how all of this feels. If some part of this is making you notice yourself differently, even in a small way, that's the point of this channel. Because sometimes understanding the pattern changes how it sits with you. But here's where it gets complicated. The same system that prepares you can also trap you. Because when your brain learns it can create emotional experiences internally, it starts relying on that. And slowly something shifts. Instead of reacting to life, you start pre-living it. You feel the disappointment before the event even happens. You rehearse conversations so many times that when they actually happen, they feel almost scripted. And here's the strange part. Sometimes the imagined version feels better than the real one. Cleaner, controlled, complete. And this is the paradox. The more vividly you can imagine life, the harder it can become to fully experience it as it unfolds. Because reality doesn't follow scripts. It interrupts. It surprises. It doesn't match the version you already It's lived in your head, so you end up in a quiet split. One part of you is living life. The other part is comparing it to a version that never existed. And that comparison is subtle, but constant. This is the one that usually makes people go quiet for a second, because the thing that gives you emotional depth also makes satisfaction harder to hold on to. Everything up to this point explains why your mind works this way. What comes next is the part that makes it feel different to live with. And here's the honest part. Sometimes this pattern isn't just imagination, it becomes avoidance. Not in an obvious way, but in a quiet one. It's easier to imagine a conversation than to risk having it. It's safer to feel something internally than to depend on it externally. And over time, that safety can cost you real experiences. Not always, but enough to notice. And if this one hits somewhere you don't usually let things reach, that's okay. Some of this runs deep. Recognizing it is already something. And if any of this feels bigger than a video can hold, that's a real signal worth listening to. Talking to someone who actually knows. This territory is never the wrong move, but here's the part that shifts everything. This isn't just a coping pattern. It's also a form of intelligence, because people who imagine scenarios like this often extremely perceptive. They understand emotional dynamics before they happen. They read situations deeply. They anticipate reactions most people miss. That's not accidental. That's a brain trained to notice, to simulate, to understand outcomes before they unfold and at their best. These are the people who see things coming, who understand people without needing everything explained, who can sit with complexity instead of rushing to simple answers. But it comes with a cost and a gift. At the same time, they were shaped by unpredictability. So they built a world inside where things made sense, and that world didn't just protect them, it expanded them. They became something like an internal architect, designing possibilities, testing realities, holding entire emotional landscapes in their mind. And that's not something everyone can do. So the next time someone says you live in your head too much, what they're actually seeing, it's a mind that learned how to simulate life before stepping into it. A mind that doesn't just experience reality, it studies it quietly, constantly. And maybe the real question isn't whether you imagine too much. It's whether anyone ever explained what that ability actually is. Something about this one tends to stay with people longer than they expect. I'd be curious what part of it stayed with you.